Okay, so we started last week chapter 51. Chapter 51 is exciting because that means we are in the last section, what I'm calling section, not obviously created by the Alter Rebbe, but the last section of Likutei Amarim, of the first book within the, what we would call 5 books of Tanya. The last section is chapters 51, 52, 53, and they're all one overarching thought. And we explained this at length last week. I'm just going to very briefly recap that we have a big question. The big question is, the Yenuka, the child of the Zohar, is explaining the significance of action commandments, giving charity, checking clothing for shatnez, forbidden mixture of wool and linen, kosher, things that have to do with the very physical fabric of life. And he's saying, wow, that's what keeps the divine presence on the body of the Jew. And he sets up a very simple and powerful metaphor for this. You have a wick that there's a fire on it. And what's maintaining the fire, the flame on the wick? The oil. The wick is in a pot of oil. As long as there is oil in the pot, the fire will always be maintained on the wick. The wick is our body, the body of the Jew. The fire is the presence of God, the Shekhinah, the divine presence. What keeps the divine presence on the body of the Jew? The oil, the mitzvahs maisias, the action commandments. Very powerful concept that we learned in chapter 35. And now, circling back to it, we're like, wait a minute. Always classically, in Hasidic thought, oil symbolizes the divine wisdom, chachma, the supernal wisdom of God, or the supernal wisdom of the soul of man, the chachma, the place most containing God's presence, both above and in ourselves, in our own souls. Chachma is, as we say, seminal wisdom, the power that we say, what is that? Because it has so little parameters and definitions. It's so open, it's so nullified. It's the closest vehicle for God's energy. That's what always is the symbol, what is always symbolized by oil. And now we're saying something seemingly completely different, talking about this highest, most refined power of soul or power of God, the source of wisdom, absolute nullification, absolute expansiveness for the divine presence, or the action commandments like putting a coin in a charity box. I mean, what? And yet the Yenuka is taking oil, which is traditionally symbolizing seminal wisdom, absolute nullification, greatest ability to express God's energy. Yeah, that oil, I'm using it to symbolize the action commandments. So our question is, what's the connection between action commandments, the most physical, seemingly from a certain perspective, lowest or least refined on the ladder, actions of service of God, to what's most refined, what's most abstract, what's most mystical and spiritual, the seminal wisdom of God or the soul of man? How is this one thing, oil, symbolizing both? There must be some deep relationship between the action commandments and seminal wisdom. What is it? That is the overarching question of chapters 51, 52, 53. To understand that, we asked another question. And the question we asked was, and this might seem like left field, but it will get us where we want to go. The question was, how can we say, and I mean, Torah says, so we know this is correct, how can we give location to God's presence? How can we say God is here, or more here, or here instead of there? I mean, God is everywhere. All is God. God is all. There's no place devoid of him. But we say the Holy of Holies, that was the place of the divine presence. Well, what do you mean? Every place is a place of the divine presence. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be. So what does this mean to ascribe a location to God like, again, classically, the Holy of Holies, that's the divine presence. That's where it's found. As if it's not found elsewhere, but we know it's found everywhere. That's the question we're dealing with to help us understand the relationship between the action commandments and the seminal wisdom. And to answer that question, how can we ascribe location to God? We said, let's speak about ourselves and how our soul relates to our body. Because when we understand our soul's relationship to body, we can apply this. We can take this concept, decontextualize it from self, and actually apply it to God in creation. And there are 3 levels of the soul within the body. Now, why am I starting off by talking about the soul within the body? I really want to talk about God in creation. Why don't I just talk about that? Why am I making this even more, Because it's hard for us to understand God in creation. Those are big terms and very far from us. But body, I understand what that means. And I even can have a grip on the concept of soul. So to speak. So to understand the workings of my soul and my body, that seems much more close to me, much more graspable to me. And once I understand that, I'm going to extrapolate and say, and just like there are 3 levels of relationship of soul to body, so too God in creation. So now we have to take like a little, actually massive step. And everything we said about soul and body, we're going to see is actually true about God in creation. Now, why is that? That's pretty random. How is my soul and body and God in creation? Because our soul-body relationship is in the mirror of God. We were created in the mirror of God. So the workings of my soul and its relationship to my body is parallel to God in creation because it's emerging from the relationship of God in creation. It's a manifestation of the relationship of God in creation. It's a mirror image of God in creation. The verse says, Mipsari echazeh Eloka. From my flesh I will perceive God. From my flesh I will perceive God? Because my flesh is made in the image of God. So the workings of my soul are in the image of God's workings. And the dynamics of my soul and my body is in the image of God in creation. So I'm going to understand myself, soul and body on 3 levels. I'm going to apply this to God in creation on 3 levels. Through this, we'll understand how we can ascribe a location to God. God is found in the Holy of Holies. And from that, we're going to understand why oil is both representing symbolic of seminal wisdom and of the action of commandments. So that's the overarching structure of these 3 chapters, and we started reading inside last week. So we are in chapter 51, and we are 8 lines from the top. We are up to the last word of the line. Now, before we read inside, let me just briefly remind you, as I said last week, what are the 3 relationships? What are the 3 relationships of soul to body? On the first highest level, the soul is throughout the entire body, and the body cannot perceive that soul at all. Meaning, the soul is on such a height, on such a high level of expression that it's not picked up by the radars of the body at all. Like certain pitches of sound, we don't hear them at all. It's real sound beyond our radar. We can't pick it up at all. This level of intensity of soul power beyond anything the body can pick up. That's the first level. And then the soul constricts itself because the soul does need to be read, perceived, absorbed in a conscious way by the body. So the soul has to constrict herself. And she's going to find the place in the whole body most receptive to soul energy, which is our highest organ, our highest aspect of body, which is the mind. So within the mind, that's the highest refinement of body, and therefore it has the highest level of sensitivity to soul. So the first level, the soul is equally in every aspect of body, brain, eyes, toenails, equally in all, very, very high level, and not experienced by anything in a conscious way that the body can perceive. And then, second level, the neshama, the soul, is constricting to be perceived by the body and is going to be expressed in the highest, most refined faculty the body has, the power of thought. So this very constricted expression of the soul is now within the mind, because the mind is our most refined aspect of physical body, and as such is the first one to perceive soul. So that's great. Now the mind can perceive the soul. But guess what? There's a whole body out there. So then the soul constricts even more. And now we get to level 3. And the soul's energy goes to every single part of the body. So first level, equally in all and equally not perceived anywhere. Second level, constricted enough to be perceived in the highest faculty of body, the brain. Third level, constricted much more, and now differentiates to go to each aspect of the body and give that aspect what it needs. And these are exactly the words we are up to reading, and this concept is developed here. This idea of the soul constricting so much to actually be differentiating within the various parts of body. So let's read it inside and then we'll explain. So we said the soul, even though on one level the soul is throughout the entire body, as we said, very high and not perceivable, but nevertheless, her main residence is in the mind. Main residence meaning now we're constricting her to be perceived, and then she's going to go into the brain because that has the most highest affinity to perceive soul. But we need a whole body to vivify. So now we go third level to reach the body. And from the brain, she's going to constrict further and extend to all the limbs. That phrase implies she's equally extending to all the limbs. We have every single part of our body, every single cell in our body. Some cells of very high functioning and high specialization. Some cells that are, so to speak, relatively speaking, the simple cells. The soul's energy equally vivifies every cell in our body. A cell in hair, a cell in the brain, a cell in the eye, a cell in the heart, a cell in the liver, a cell in the skin, all equally receiving existence from this manifestation of soul. Now, of course, on the first level of soul, the soul also gave existence to all and gave existence to all equally. But it was sort of a limited giving because from the recipient's end, the bodies, there was no reading that energy. So now, after the soul diminished itself, constricted itself to be read by the brain, it's further constricting itself to now go to every aspect of the body and give every single cell life. And that life it's giving is the same for every single cell, no matter how specialized or how simple. That's one of the things the soul's energy is now going to do. But there's something else as well. As the Alter Rebbe continues to say, the whole Ever and every limb, Mekabel Mimena, receives from the soul that is currently, so to speak, in her fortress residence of the brain, Chayes v'koyach hara'oi loi, the vitality, the power that's appropriate for this cell, for this limb, for this body part. Lefi mizgo v'tchunaso, according to its nature, according to its characteristics, according to its functionality, what it's supposed to do in the body. As the Rebbe says, ha'ayin liros, the eye receives the ability to see. Va'oizen lishmoya, the ear to hear. Va'peh ledaber, the mouth to speak. Va'agrayim lahaloch, and the feet, the legs, to walk. So the Rebbe here is saying something fascinating, if you think about it. The Rebbe is saying there's two dimensions to what the soul is doing now to energize the body. On one level, the soul is equally giving all, no differentiation, life, existence. Every cell gets existence from the soul, whose primary residence now is the brain. And then there's something else the soul is doing. The soul is giving every body part the ability to do what that body part is supposed to do. Like the Rebbe says, the eye to see. So what we're saying here is the ability of the eye to see is a godly ability that this physical organ receives. As I've seen, I think maybe in the writings of the Rebbe Rayatz, that he says we see all of these are godly abilities because, for example, an eye, you can have an eye that every part's in place, every part's there, and yet the person doesn't see. So that means there's some power of sight that can't be dissected under a microscope. It's not perceivable by a microscope. The microscope says, yeah, every part is totally there, but the person's not seeing. I don't mean they literally take a microscope to a living eye, but you understand the point I'm saying. Just like you can't cut up the body and find soul, You're not going to be able to cut it up and find that soul, but it's there. You can't find in the physical parts of the eye or the ear power of sight, power of hearing. And the Rebbe's saying, because those are spiritual powers. And that's, of course, why we want to remedy physical ailments with spirituality. It's all a mirror of spirituality. It's all actually fueled by spirituality. So now we have this interesting question that we could delve into far more than we will. But I'm just going to try to briefly explain it. The question is sort of philosophical in nature, but relates to what we're saying here. So we are saying the soul, the same soul, no differentiation, its energy through every part of the body, very high, not at all picked up by the body. The soul constricts itself and is expressed in the brain. Her fortress, her residence, her palace, her place. The soul constricts itself further and sends now her powers to every single part of the body. The powers do two things. The first thing is very simple. Give life. We know all life comes from the soul, right? The soul is the source of life. Even if it's going through the animal soul, it's only going through the animal soul. The source is the soul. So that life is the same for every part of our body. Okay, that makes sense. And now the Rebbe is saying, and additionally, there's a differentiated power that goes to each organ, to each limb, to each body part, to give it its ability to do its function in the body. Now the question here is, and you could sort of see it in both directions, is it that an energy flows from the soul, and when that energy reaches the eye translates that energy into the ability to see. And when that same energy reaches the ear, it translates that to the ability to hear. When that same energy reaches the kneecap, it translates that in the ability to flex, to create movement. Is that what the Rebbe is saying? No, it's not what the Rebbe is saying, actually. What the Rebbe is saying is that to each body part, a different energy is given to give it its functionality. This is ability to see. We're sending this to the eye. Ability to hear. Ability to flex and create movement. Each aspect of body receives its specialized function energy from the soul. In other words, if you were trying to think of this metaphorically, you could say, let's say you have a bunch of colored glasses. Pink, purple, blue, orange. You're pouring in each glass water. Same water. But looking through the glass, this looks like orange water, this looks like pink water, this looks like purple water. Cool. But if I would take the glasses, nobody drank. No germs involved here at all. I take the glasses at the end of my fancy meal that nobody touched the water, and I pour it back into the pitcher, it's clear. Because it was always clear. It was just in the different colored glasses, it took on a different hue, seemingly. But that was really the hue of the glasses, not of the water itself. So some people would think that's what the Rebbe is saying here. Why would we think that? Because the soul is an essence, we would say, a simple essence, a non-differentiated essence. So from her essence, energy extends, and the eye translates that energy to the power of sight, and the ear to the power of hearing. That all makes perfect sense, by the way. That's very, very logical. But the Alter Rebbe says that's not what's happening. The Alter Rebbe says something less probable, that we would less likely assume. The Alter Rebbe says, within the soul, that simple organism, there's already differentiation, and that expresses itself now when we're in this third level of soul, third constriction of soul, to literally give each body part its energy. You can say, well, how does the soul have the energies for every body part? The soul is like this, like one unit, this simple essence unit. Where in her do we have sight and hearing and movement? And what does it have to do with the soul? So maybe a muscle for it. This might not be a great muscle, but if you think of a seed, right? You can put a seed in the ground and it's going to rot and the plant's going to come forth. Really, the seed looks like this little, tiny seed. But embedded in the seed is all that's going to be in that plant. And even if on the surface you have a bunch of seeds and they look very similar, but from this one comes, we're going to say tomatoes, and from this one comes, we're going to say roses. No, within the seed on the surface, it looks very simple structure. Look, it's a seed. But it already contains the differentiation that will be in the plant, though not something we could see when it's still embedded in the seed. So within the neshama, within the soul, which seems like a simple structure, When I say simple, I don't mean like not very smart or not very sophisticated. What I mean by simple is one dimension. Soul, it's not an eye, it's not an ear, it's not legs, it's soul. It's this one dimension of soul. But within that, in a latent seed-like way, is every faculty of the body. Amazing. So truly, when the neshama gets squeezed enough, again, this isn't level 1 and this isn't level 2, this isn't level 3. In level 1, she was within the entire body, and the same for every element of the body, for every aspect of the body, for every organ and limb of the body, for every vein and artery of the body. It was exactly the same, because she wasn't relating to the body like that. She was too big to be relating like that. But now when we're in level 3, she got really small for a soul. She's relating to every part, and she's pulling out of herself. Within that simple structured organism of the soul, so to speak, all those differentiations are found. And therefore she is giving each body part what it needs. So every part of our body, when it functions, it's functioning from a spiritual energy, which is fascinating. Well, my body's my physical part. Not really. There's spiritual energies that are flowing through every aspect of our body. And that's what's, getting our body to function as a body. So the body and the soul have such a synergy. They're so fused that even within the physicality of the body, nope, that's from soul. Now, how does the Rebbe prove this to us? Which has a lot more depth and concepts that I'm developing here. I'm just trying to give like sort of a simplified version of the story, but hopefully a clear version of the story. How do we prove this? Again, think of the concept of like the water. So I have the water, pours into those different colored glasses, and it looks different. But if I poured it back into the original picture, it would still be clear because it was always the same. It's just the different colored glasses made it look different. The Rebbe says, nope, that's not what's going on here. It's differentiated to start. From the soul, it's not the same color. From the soul, so to speak, to use this mushal, it's flowing pink and purple and green and yellow. Every aspect of body, sight and hearing and movement and growth and digestion, every aspect of body, that energy is flowing from soul. So the Rebbe says, how can we say this? How can we see this in our body? The Rebbe says, because if you have a pain, this is what we're about to read. If you have a pain, localized, I mean, it's not a pain throughout your entire body. It's a pain in a certain part of your body. You will perceive that pain in your brain. You will be sensitive to it. Will you be aware of where in that body that pain is? Yeah, of course. The question was, my toe is hurting me right now. I don't know. Something's wrong with my toe. I feel it. That toe. Yeah, that toe on that foot. Well, the Rebbe says, if from the soul it was all the same, again, like flowing the water just into different colored glasses, once it leaves the brain, it's all the same flow leaving. There should be no concept of identification of the part because it's all the same water. I mean, from the pitcher's end, it's all the same water flowing. So there's no differentiation which glass it got into. So how would the soul then pick up the pain that body part is experiencing? It can pick up pain. It can feel what the body's feeling, but how does it know where it is? The Rebbe says it knows where it is because it sent very specific energy to every specific part of your body. So it's that energy I'm feeling. Oh, that's that toe. Now, what the Rebbe is saying here, if you think about it, if you think about your body, and if you think about the health of your body, it's very amazing because the Rebbe is literally these are not my words. We're going to read them inside right now. The Rebbe is looking at your body's awareness, your body's sense of its parts, and all the functionality of the body, all as expressions of soul. And again, this goes back, and we discussed this last week, and I think here it's even more strong, this point, how there's such a spiritual component to healing. Because we're seeing there's such a spiritual component to the functionality of our body. You're picking up that it's your toe. Your soul is picking up that it's your toe. Your soul's aware it's your toe because your soul's saying that toe has specific energy, and that's the energy it's reading right now. That's what the Rebbe is saying. That's the relationship of soul to body. And as I probably mentioned last week, it says in the Talmud, well, if you have what we would call a headache, study Torah. You have a backache, study Torah. You have a digestive pain, study Torah. Why? Because really all of this goes back to spirituality. And Torah is the strongest connection we have to spirituality. So every part of the body and all of its ailments, the healing is in Torah. So why do we use Tylenol or Motrin? Why don't we open up a Gemara or open up a Tanya or open up a Chumash when we have a headache? Well, we're told if we tried, it probably wouldn't work for us. But the only reason it wouldn't work for us is because we don't know which part of Torah relates to the energies of the headache, relates to the digestive system, relates to the skin and its growth or pains. But if we knew where in Torah each of these issues are found, and we delved in Torah, that's the source of healing. That's what the Gemara is saying, very literally. This is Gemara, this isn't Chassidus. Talmud, the revealed aspect of Torah, is saying the healing of all body should be in Torah, could be in Torah, if only we knew which part of Torah related to each ailment in our body. Now, we don't. So we do take the Tylenol or the Motrin. But the concept is still true. And of course, generalized and decontextualized from the specific which mitzvah is going to help for this ailment, which Torah is going to help for this ailment. But the overarching picture is our body's energy is spiritual. And our body's healing, therefore, has a lot to do with spirituality. Any thoughts, any reflections on any of this?
Well, there are these interactive tooth charts online from dentists, and every tooth and groups of teeth are related to organs. They're connected by energetic meridian to our organs. So that seems to me to say that says, it's not in the Torah that it says that, but it is a real thing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and there's lots of real things like that nowadays at different, yes, there are many other connections like that, 100%. There are connections that show what you're saying. Not only
Like the bottom front teeth are all related to the urinary tract system.
There's things like that, and yeah, I've heard other things like that, different parts of your face and different aspects in your temples, and they all relate to different parts of your entire body. That's why by massaging a certain part of your body, you're actually affecting the healing in another part. Yes.
Absolutely. Right. That's with the reflexology with the feet.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so it's good. Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on this?
We just read a story tonight. Like, we got this book that Rebbe stories, and somebody during COVID had his heart problem where it was racing, and they had to do a certain surgery, but it had to be delayed, and he didn't know what to do. And he looked up, the Rebbe said, by learning Rambam, you could actually heal your body. And so he took it upon himself to be very strict on doing 3 prakim, which he wasn't doing before, of Tanya. And finally, when COVID was lifted, they were going to be able to do the surgery, and they took another, they checked him, and they saw that it was just about normal. Wow. And he said, well, how could this be? And he told him, because he was Jewish, that he's learning Rambam, and he said, I don't know, let's do this test again. And then he was really, really extremely careful about learning Rambam, and it was totally normal. And so the nurse called back and said to him, that he didn't need any surgeries, that everything was normal. And he said, send regards to Rambam. So he didn't believe it at first, but then he did. But just
it's an amazing story, because it literally is reflecting exactly what you're saying. Wow. Amazing story. That really is wow. That's amazing. Just to clarify, because I never heard that story, did the Rebbe say that the Rambam is for a specific type of issue, or just in general healing of the body?
I don't know. He just, by Hashgacha Pratis, saw this written, the Rebbe had said this, and so he took this on himself. Wow. So I don't know. Like, I think he just said that for the healing of the body. I don't think it was.
I could imagine that the Rambam, when tzaddik, when a holy Jew, a very, very, very godly Jew, writes a godly work, he puts his own energies in the work because the tzaddik mirrors God. And it says about God that when he gave us the Torah, he gave us himself. That's why the first word of the Ten Commandments is Anochi, which means I, but it's not the normal Hebrew word for I. The normal Hebrew word for I is a simpler word, Ani. This word is Anochi. And our sages say that Anochi is an acrostic of 4 Aramaic words, Ananafshi Kasavas Yahavis, which means I put myself in the writings. So God is saying, when I gave you the Torah, I gave you myself. If you want God, learn Torah. That's true for all Torah. When a tzaddik writes a godly work, like Rambam, Maimonides, he's putting his energies in that work. And when we study his work, we're connecting to him. The Rebbe actually says, I saw this a few months ago, that when you're learning the work of a tzaddik, it's good to have that in mind. Meaning when you're, I don't remember exactly how the Rebbe said it, so I don't want to misquote, but that's how it translated in my brain. I don't remember exactly. Like in general, when you're learning Torah, have in mind, God is in this Torah. As I learn Torah, I'm connecting to God. And to extrapolate that further, as I'm learning Rambam, Maimonides' works, I'm connecting to God, this is Torah, and I'm connecting to Maimonides as he invested his soul energies in this work. So I think it just makes so much sense, the story, not that it has to make sense, it's true, but because we know that, of course, Maimonides, his energy was an energy of a healer. So I could just so see this point here of he put in his Torah his energy, which is healing. Though, of course, all Torah is healing, but it makes sense, this idea that he was studying seriously Maimonides' work, and it really helped him heal. That's very beautiful and very, very, very appropriate for tonight's lesson. Anyone else? Any other thoughts or reflections on this? Okay. So let's continue. Kanira Bachush. Again, now the Rebbe is, as I said, proving his point. This is his proof. It's not a verse, but it's a fact as he's understanding the body-soul relationship. As we see in actuality, I don't have to prove this to you, so to speak. I don't have to give you a quote. We all live this. What do we see in actuality? Shebemayach, that in the brain, margish kol hanifal b'marach evarim b'chol hakorososam, that this brain is sensitive to, it feels all that is occurring in every single limb of the body and all that happens to them. Again, there's a specialized connection from the brain, and the Rebbe here means we're talking about soul powers. So the soul in the brain, because that's the central fortress of the soul, is the brain. So from that soul in the brain, it's experiencing in a very specific way every part of your body. Because every part of your body, it's a very specific energy to. So that's why it's sensitive. Oh, that's that energy. That's that energy. Because it's connected to it because it's specialized for that part of the body. V'hine, ein shinoi kabolas hakochos v'achayis sheb ivri haguf min ha-neshama mitzad atzma muhusa. Shiyeh muhusa v'atzma is chalek l'ramach chalakim sheinu mislabim t'ramach mekayimos v'yitzir chalkim mekomos ivri haguf. So Aaron says, well, what are we saying here? Or let's not misunderstand this. There shouldn't be any difference in the receiving of the powers, the vitality in the limbs of the body from the soul's essence and being. Is the essence and being of the soul divisible into all these body parts, into these 248 different parts of the body? That therefore she is sending to 248 different places, 248 different energies, because she's really subdivides into these 248 different parts? If that's what's happening, because if that's what's happening, then we would say, nimtza, it comes out, atzmusa umehusa, mitzuyer b'tzir gashmi. The essence and being of the soul, which is indivisible, which is essence, which is beyond differentiation, is actually divisible into these 248 parts. So the Rebbe is saying, wait a minute, what are we saying here? We just said, and we constructed this carefully, and I spent a long time explaining it, that from the soul, it's not water that when it goes into the eye, it's sight, and when it goes into the ear, it's hearing. Clear water in different colored glasses looks different. No, that's not what's going on at all. It's a different color water in each organ. It's the power of sight in the eye and the power of hearing in the ear. So every body part is receiving something very specialized from the soul for its function. So the Rebbe says, the Rebbe is telling us this, and the Rebbe says, wait, what does this mean? Does this mean that in the essence and being of the soul, it's actually, so to speak, as small as a body, as physical as a body, divisible into the parts as the parts of a body? The soul's essence and being. Essence and being is not divisible that way. Essence and being is beyond differentiation. But we're saying from the soul comes this differentiation. Like I gave you the metaphor of the seed, and within the seed is all that will grow forth. We don't see it, it's a little seed, but it's all there in its incipient space, stage, tiny, but from there it comes forth, the whole plant, right? I gave you that metaphor. The Rebbe says, so what's going on? Is that the essence of the soul? Like that small? That concrete? That divisible? Are we, God forbid, saying a soul is basically a structure like a body, but just happens to be a spiritual structure? A body has different parts, and a soul has different parts. In other words, the Rebbe is saying that's making the soul awfully small, because soul, essence, transcends differentiation. So if I'm understanding soul as this indivisible essence, it's higher than differentiation. But the Rebbe is clearly saying, so let's go back to the clear water and the glasses. The Rebbe said, no, that's not what's going on. Like that would be an easy out, so to speak. That would make a lot of sense to us. I mean, it wouldn't bother me at all, that's for sure. The soul transcends all differentiation. It's a soul. It's higher than differentiation. It's pure and non-divisible. And when that power goes to the eye can see. And when that power goes to the ear can hear. And the power goes to the elbow can flex. Perfect. As I said, makes perfect sense to me. I got no problems with it. But the Rebbe says, no, that's not what's going on, actually. The Rebbe told us that's what's going on. There's a special power to an eye, and a different power to an ear, and a different power to an elbow. Okay. The Rebbe says, no, I also was fine accepting that. It didn't bother me at all either. The Rebbe says, but understand the ramifications of that. Understand what you're saying. If that's true, and we know it's true, the Rebbe told us, then let's go back to the source, which gave the eye the power to see and the ear the power to hear, and say, but what's going on in the source? Like, is the soul that small? Is the soul body-like in structure? Or is the soul essence? Essence is not divisible. Essence, as I said, transcends differentiation. So I think it's essence which transcends differentiation. But I'm at the same time saying that we have here the differentiation, and that's why every part is receiving a very specialized power. So how do these two ideas work together? How does this function from a soul? Again, like I said, I'm not such a deep thinker. It's water and each part is different, no problem. It's differentiated, no problem. The soul transcends differentiation, no problem. The Rebbe says, well, there is a problem, because how do we put all these pieces together? Ella, rather, kula etzem echad ruchni pashut. No way. The soul is not like a body, but it happens to be spiritual and not physical. The soul is not divisible into the parts like the parts of a body. The soul is soul. The soul transcends any differentiation. The entirety of the soul is one spiritual, simple essence, like a one-celled being, so to speak. One, like God, is simple, is one, does not differentiate into parts. The soul, made in God's image, is one, is not differentiating into parts. Umufshat mikol tzir gashmi. The soul is totally detached and remote, and in no way does it have any form like the form of physicality. Well, I mean, I understand it's a spiritual form of physicality. No, the Rebbe says, it's spiritual and it has no form like the form of physicality. No like body parts, but they happen to be spiritual body parts. It's a soul. Umibechinas v'geder makom umida v'gvul gashmi. Now, the Rebbe used a lot of words, but the words all are to give us the same perspective of parameters, limits, definitions, finite. That's what physical is. So the soul does not have parameters. The soul does not have space. The soul does not have measurability. The soul does not have boundaries. All of those things, even though we're saying, well, in a spiritual way, it has all those things. No, because all of those things are the components, are the expressions, are the characteristics of physical. And a soul is not a spiritualized version of physicality. You know, if you think of like Lahavdil, anything else besides Judaism, or any copycat of Judaism, mythology. Not that you have to deeply go into mythology now to understand what I'm going to say, but when man is making God, when a man is trying to conceptualize God, what he does is he takes himself and makes a bigger, stronger, more perfect, more beautiful, more powerful, more wealthy version of self. And he calls that God, because that's exactly what all mythology is. It's like all the characteristics and strengths and weaknesses of man, but like more powerful, bigger, because we're calling it God. So, chas v'shalom. We're not saying, I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just giving that as the example to understand the point that Rebbe is saying here. We're not saying a soul is spiritual, but like a body, but a spiritual version of a body. Like Lahavdil, Alfei Avdallas. A God is like man, but bigger, stronger, more powerful, more beautiful, more wise. No. This is God. This is man. This is creator. This is creation. Not the same. Well, the soul is not God. But the soul's in the image of God. Remember we said, from my flesh, from my own spiritual workings, I can extrapolate and understand God's. Because our soul was made in God's image. So my body has all the words I used before that the soul does not have. It has place, and it has boundary, and it has limitation, and it has measurability. All that's true of a body. None of that's true of a soul, and none of that's true of like a spiritual version of that. No, none of that's true of a soul. A soul, God-like, transcends all differentiation. God is simple. I don't know if you ever heard this saying of the Baal Shem Tov, that God loves a simple man, because the simplicity, many stories of the Baal Shem Tov's love for very, very simple Jews. We even have a term for them. We call them like, a Baal Shem Tov's Yid, a Jew of the Baal Shem Tov's cut. Meaning, not that the Baal Shem Tov was simple, but that the Baal Shem Tov had a special, special love for the very simple Jews. And in the times of the Baal Shem Tov, after the Gzeros Tachvatat, after Chmielnicky's massacre of the Jewish communities, insane massacre, insane how much of Judaism was wiped out under Chmielnicky. So the Jews that left, that had no community structure, no learning, and were just struggling to survive and have food, they were very, very simple. And the Baal Shem Tov would say that God loves these simple Jews because their simplicity reflects his own. Meaning God transcends all, and therefore simple, non-divisible, non-specialized, simple, one, God. That simplicity, so to speak, can be found in the very, very simple Jew. So our soul, made in God's image, is absolutely simple, absolutely transcending any of those words that create space and specificity. So what's going on, the Rebbe is saying? I want to say the soul is like God and absolutely simple. And at the same time, I'm saying that the soul is giving specialized powers to every aspect of body. How do these two work together? We will stop here. We will find out next week.